My father threw the contract across his mahogany desk, his face red with fury. "Sign it or get out of my house forever," he screamed, pointing at the inheritance documents that would strip me of everything our family built. I was 25, fresh out of law school, and he thought I was just another naive daughter who would cave to his demands. What he did not know was that I had actually read every single word of those papers. He had not. Before we dive into how my own father tried to destroy me and how karma came for him in the most spectacular way possible, I need to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button, because this family revenge story will blow your mind. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell, because you will not want to miss how this entitled father gets exactly what he deserves when his own greed backfires. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate, I always knew something was off about our family dynamics. My father, Richard Blackwood, ran Blackwood Industries like his personal kingdom, and my stepmother, Victoria, treated me like an unwelcome guest in my own home. But it was not until I returned from Harvard Law that I discovered the full extent of their betrayal. The first red flag came during dinner 3 weeks after my graduation. Victoria was flaunting a new diamond necklace that cost more than most people make in a year, while simultaneously complaining about the company's tight budget. My father nodded along, claiming we needed to cut unnecessary expenses, which apparently included my promised position at the family firm. "Sweetheart," he said with that condescending smile I had grown to hate, "we have decided that your brother Marcus is better suited for the leadership role. You understand, right? It is nothing personal." Marcus. My half-brother, who had barely scraped through community college and spent most of his 20s partying with trust fund babies. The same Marcus who had crashed 3 company cars and somehow still got promoted to vice president while I was earning my law degree with highest honors. That night I could not sleep. Something about their behavior felt orchestrated, rehearsed. Victoria's nervous laughter when she mentioned the budget cuts, my father's refusal to make eye contact, Marcus smirking into his wine glass like he knew a secret I did not. So I did what any good lawyer would do. I started investigating. My first break came from our longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had practically raised me after my biological mother died when I was 8. She mentioned seeing a lot of important-looking men in suits visiting the house late at night over the past 6 months, always when I was away at school. "They would go straight to your father's study," she whispered while folding laundry. "And afterward, Victoria would be so happy buying new jewelry and planning expensive trips. It made me worry, mija." Mrs. Rodriguez had been with our family for 15 years. She knew where every document was filed, every hiding spot my father used for his confidential papers. More importantly, she trusted me enough to share what she had observed. The second piece of the puzzle came from my college roommate Jessica, whose father worked for the Securities and Exchange Commission. During a casual phone call, she mentioned hearing her dad discuss a case involving some Connecticut manufacturing company that was under investigation for financial irregularities. My blood ran cold. Blackwood Industries was the only major manufacturing company in our area. I started spending my evenings in my father's study while he and Victoria went out to their social events. What I found made me physically sick. Hidden in a false bottom of his filing cabinet were bank statements showing massive transfers to offshore accounts. $3.7 million had been moved out of company pension funds over the past 18 months. Money that belonged to hardworking employees who had dedicated decades to building our family business. But that was not the worst part. I found correspondence between my father and Victoria's brother David, who apparently ran a shell company in the Cayman Islands. They had been systematically draining not just the pension funds, but also the employee healthcare accounts and the worker compensation fund. Hundreds of families who trusted the Blackwood name were being robbed blind. The emails made my stomach churn. My father wrote about employees like they were disposable assets. "These blue-collar workers will never notice a few missing percentage points," he had typed to David. "They are too stupid to read the fine print anyway." Victoria had replied to one email thread with, "Once we get rid of the girl and make Marcus the official heir, we can accelerate the timeline. She is the only one smart enough to figure this out." The girl. They were talking about me like I was an obstacle to be eliminated. I printed everything. Every bank statement, every email, every document that proved their elaborate fraud scheme. Then I made copies and stored them in 3 different locations. One in my bedroom, one in a safety deposit box I opened the next day, and one with Jessica's father, who had connections at the SEC. The final piece of evidence came from an unlikely source, Marcus himself. 3 days before the contract ultimatum, I overheard him on the phone with someone bragging about how the old man finally grew a backbone and was going to force his bratty daughter to sign away her inheritance rights. "She thinks she is so smart with that law degree," Marcus laughed. "But she has no idea what is coming. Once she signs those papers, she loses everything. Her inheritance, her stake in the company, even her right to contest the will." Dad's lawyer made sure the language was ironclad. My heart pounded as I realized they had been planning this for months. The late-night meetings, the expensive purchases, the sudden decision to exclude me from the company. It was all part of a coordinated effort to steal my birthright while covering up their crimes. But here is what they did not know. I had spent the last 3 years studying contract law under Professor Williams, who was famous for teaching his students to find loopholes that even experienced attorneys missed. When my father threw those papers across his desk and demanded I sign them or leave forever, I was ready. The morning after my father's ultimatum, I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by evidence of the most elaborate financial fraud I had ever encountered. 24 hours to decide whether to sign away my inheritance or be disowned forever. Those were my options, according to Richard Blackwood. What he did not realize was that I had already made my choice the moment I discovered their scheme. I spent the entire night reading through the inheritance modification documents with a magnifying glass and 3 different legal dictionaries. The contract was expertly crafted to strip me of everything while making it appear voluntary. According to the terms, I would forfeit my stake in Blackwood Industries, my trust fund, my inheritance rights, and even my legal standing to challenge the family will in the future. But then I found it. Buried in Section 12, subsection 4, paragraph 7, was a single sentence that made my heart race. This agreement becomes null and void if the primary benefactor is found to have engaged in fraudulent financial activity during the 12 months preceding the contract date. My father's own lawyer had included a fraud clause, probably as standard legal protection, and Richard had been too arrogant to read the fine print. I had him. The next morning, I walked into his study wearing my best business suit and carrying a briefcase filled with evidence. My father and Victoria were already there, along with Marcus, and a man I did not recognize wearing an expensive suit. "This is my attorney, Mr. Harrison," my father announced smugly. "He is here to witness your signature and ensure everything is legally binding." Victoria could not contain her excitement. She was practically bouncing in her chair, already mentally spending my inheritance money. "I have made my decision," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on the desk. "Smart girl," Marcus sneered. "I knew you would see reason eventually." I opened the briefcase and pulled out the contract along with a folder containing photocopies of every document I had discovered. My father's lawyer looked confused as I spread the evidence across the mahogany surface. "Before I sign anything," I said, my voice steady, despite my racing heart, "I think we should discuss these interesting financial records I found in your filing cabinet, Dad." The color drained from Richard's face as he recognized the bank statements showing offshore transfers. Victoria made a strangled, gasping sound, and Marcus looked like he was about to vomit. "Where did you get those?" my father whispered. "From your own files," I replied. "The same files that show you have embezzled $3.7 million from employee pension funds over the past 18 months. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, immediately stood up and began examining the documents. His expression grew more horrified with each page he turned. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, his voice shaking, "these appear to show systematic financial fraud. If these documents are authentic, this inheritance contract cannot be legally executed. What do you mean? Victoria screeched. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It means your own contract includes a fraud clause that nullifies the entire agreement if the primary benefactor, that would be dear old Dad, has engaged in criminal financial activity. The room fell silent except for the sound of Victoria's heavy breathing and the rustle of papers as Mr. Harrison continued his examination. Furthermore, I continued pulling out my phone. I have already forwarded copies of all this evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, and the Connecticut State Attorney General's office. They should be very interested in investigating where exactly those pension funds disappeared to. Marcus found his voice first. You cannot do this. This is family. Family. I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. Family does not steal from hard-working employees who trusted us. Family does not try to manipulate their own daughter into signing away her rights. And family certainly does not call their own flesh and blood too stupid to read the fine print. My father's face went white. You read the emails. Every single one, I confirmed. Including the ones where you and David planned to accelerate the theft timeline once I was out of the picture. Including the ones where Victoria referred to longtime employees as disposable assets. Victoria finally exploded. You ungrateful little brat. We gave you everything. This house, your education, your privileged lifestyle. You gave me those things with stolen money, I shot back. Money that belonged to people like Mrs. Rodriguez's husband who worked in your factory for 20 years and now faces retirement with nothing because you raided his pension fund. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Blackwood, I cannot in good conscience proceed with this contract signing. In fact, I strongly recommend you retain criminal defense counsel immediately. Wait, my father said desperately. We can work this out. Family negotiations, private settlements. There is no need to involve outside authorities. I shook my head. The authorities are already involved. The SEC investigation officially opens Monday morning. The IRS audit begins Tuesday, and the State Attorney General has scheduled a meeting with me for Wednesday to discuss criminal charges. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Marcus made the mistake that would seal their fate forever. You are going to regret this, he snarled, stepping toward me aggressively. When this all blows over, we will make sure you never see a penny of family money. We will destroy you. I pulled out my phone again and showed him the voice recording app that had been running the entire time. Thank you for that threat, Marcus. I am sure the prosecutor will find it very interesting when I submit it as evidence of intimidation and witness tampering. Victoria started crying. Ugly, mascara-streaked tears that had nothing to do with remorse, and everything to do with the realization that their carefully planned scheme was collapsing around them. You planned this, she accused. You have been plotting against us this whole time. I have been protecting myself, I corrected. And protecting the innocent employees you have been robbing. Someone had to stand up to you eventually. My father slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. What happens now? I gathered my evidence back into the briefcase, leaving the inheritance contract unsigned on his desk where it belonged. Now you face the consequences of your choices, I said. The federal investigation will determine the criminal charges. The civil lawsuits from defrauded employees will determine the financial damages. And I will be working with the prosecutor to ensure full restitution for every stolen penny. As I walked toward the door, I turned back one final time. Oh, and Dad, next time you try to manipulate someone into signing a contract, you might want to actually read it first. That fraud clause you missed, it does not just nullify this agreement, it also triggers an automatic investigation into all family trust funds and corporate assets. What does that mean? Marcus asked frantically. I smiled. It means everything you thought you were inheriting. It is about to be frozen pending criminal investigation, including that new Porsche you just bought with stolen pension money. The last thing I heard as I closed the study door was Victoria's anguished wail and my father's broken whisper, "What have we done?" Walking out of that study felt like stepping into a completely different world. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, but I knew the real fight was just beginning. Taking down a sophisticated financial fraud scheme would require more than just evidence. I needed allies' strategy and ironclad legal backing. My first stop was the Connecticut State Attorney General's office, where I had scheduled an emergency meeting with prosecutor Sarah Martinez, who specialized in white-collar crime. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had built her career on taking down corrupt corporate executives. "Miss Blackwood," she said as I entered her cramped office filled with case files, "when you called yesterday claiming your family was running a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme, I was skeptical. After reviewing the documents you submitted, I am convinced we are looking at one of the most brazen corporate frauds I have seen in 15 years." She spread my evidence across her conference table like a prosecutor preparing for trial. "The pension fund diversions alone constitute federal crimes. Add in the healthcare account manipulations and the offshore money laundering, and we are talking about charges that could result in decades in federal prison." But Sarah also gave me a sobering reality check. "Your family will not go down without a fight," she warned. "They have money connections and expensive lawyers. The moment criminal charges are filed, they will launch a coordinated attack on your credibility. They will claim you forged documents, that you are a disgruntled daughter seeking revenge, that this is all an elaborate family dispute blown out of proportion." That same afternoon, I met with Jessica's father, Thomas Anderson, at the Securities and Exchange Commission's regional office. As a senior investigator, he had seen every type of financial crime imaginable. "The good news," he explained while reviewing my evidence, "is that this case is relatively straightforward. The money trail is clear, the documentation is extensive, and the amounts are significant enough to warrant serious federal attention." "What is the bad news?" I asked. "The bad news is that your father is already 3 steps ahead of us. Our preliminary investigation shows that significant assets have been moved in the past 72 hours. Offshore accounts are being closed, shell companies are being dissolved, and liquid assets are being transferred to jurisdictions with strict banking privacy laws." My heart sank. "Are you saying they are going to get away with it?" Thomas shook his head. "Not necessarily. But it means we need to move faster than they can cover their tracks. We need inside information, preferably from someone with direct access to their current financial maneuvering." That evening, I received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. "Miss Blackwood, this is Janet Morrison, Chief Financial Officer at Blackwood Industries. I think we need to talk." Janet was a 50-something accountant who had worked for our company for 12 years. I remembered her as a quiet, meticulous woman who rarely spoke at company gatherings, but somehow knew every financial detail of our operations. We met at a small coffee shop 20 minutes outside town where Janet revealed information that made my stomach churn. "I have known about the missing money for 8 months," she admitted, her hands shaking as she held her coffee cup. "Your father told me it was temporary borrowing to cover cash flow problems. He promised the money would be returned before anyone noticed." "But you did notice," I pointed out. She nodded miserably. "When the missing amounts reached $2 million, I confronted him. That is when Victoria got involved and made it clear that my continued employment and my pension depended on my cooperation." Janet pulled out a flash drive and slid it across the table. "Everything is on there: real-time financial records, current account numbers, passwords to offshore systems. I have been documenting everything because I knew this day would come." "Why are you helping me now?" I asked, her eyes filled with tears. "Because yesterday your father told me I would need to falsify the year-end pension statements to hide the missing funds. 23 families depend on those pensions for retirement. I cannot live with destroying their futures to protect his crimes." But Janet also brought disturbing news about my family's counterattack strategy. "They hired a private investigation firm to dig up dirt on you," she revealed. "They are also spreading rumors at the country club that you have had psychological problems since college, that you are making false accusations because you are angry about being excluded from the business." More troubling was Victoria's involvement with local media contacts. She has been calling reporters claiming this is all a family dispute that got out of hand. She is painting herself as a devoted stepmother, dealing with a troubled stepdaughter who cannot accept family business decisions. The next morning brought my third crucial ally, Detective Mike Torres from the Connecticut State Police Financial Crimes Unit. Sarah Martinez had brought him in because local law enforcement would be essential for executing search warrants and making arrests. I have been investigating corporate fraud for 15 years, he told me during our meeting at the state attorney's office, and I have never seen a case where the perpetrators left such a clear evidence trail. Your father either thought he was untouchable or he seriously underestimated your intelligence. Detective Torres had already begun preliminary surveillance of my family's activities. What he discovered was alarming. They are planning to flee the country, he revealed. We have documented 3 separate visits to travel agencies specializing in countries without extradition treaties. Victoria made inquiries about selling the family estate quickly below market value if necessary. How long do we have? I asked. Based on their timeline, I estimate 72 hours before they disappear permanently. That afternoon, Sarah Martinez called an emergency strategy meeting with all our allies. The plan that emerged was ambitious and risky, but it was our only chance to stop my family before they vanished with millions in stolen money. We execute simultaneous actions across multiple fronts, Sarah explained. Federal search warrants for all properties and financial institutions. State police arrests for the primary suspects. Asset freezing orders for domestic and offshore accounts. And media coordination to ensure the public understands this is serious criminal activity, not family drama. Janet would continue providing real-time intelligence about my father's activities while wearing a wire to record any additional incriminating statements. Detective Torres would coordinate with federal marshals to prevent any attempt to flee the country. Thomas Anderson would work with international banking authorities to freeze offshore assets before they could be moved again. My role was perhaps the most dangerous. I would return home and act as if nothing had changed, gathering final pieces of evidence while my family planned their escape. They will be watching you closely, Sarah warned. Any indication that you are working with law enforcement could trigger immediate flight or worse attempts to intimidate or harm you. As our meeting concluded, Janet pulled me aside with one final piece of intelligence that made my blood run cold. Your father and Marcus had a private conversation yesterday that I overheard, she whispered. They were discussing whether you pose too much of a threat to leave behind. Victoria suggested that tragic accidents happen to young women living alone, especially ones suffering from emotional distress over family conflicts. The implication was clear. My family was not just planning to flee justice. They were considering eliminating the witness who could testify against them. Walking back to my car, I realized that exposing their crimes had transformed me from disappointed daughter to active target. But I also knew that hundreds of innocent families were depending on me to see this through. The war for justice was about to begin, and my own family had just declared me their primary enemy. As I drove home to continue playing the role of obedient daughter, while secretly gathering evidence for federal prosecutors, one thought kept running through my mind. My father had taught me that family loyalty was everything, but he never mentioned what to do when family becomes the enemy. Tomorrow would bring the most dangerous phase of our plan, and I would be walking directly into the heart of a criminal conspiracy led by the people who raised me. The irony was not lost on me that the same legal education my father paid for was about to destroy him, and he still had no idea just how thoroughly he had underestimated his own daughter. Returning home that evening felt like walking into a lion's den. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the hallway reminded me that I was now living with people who saw me as a threat to eliminate. But I had a job to do, and hundreds of families were counting on me to gather the final evidence needed to bring down this criminal conspiracy. My father and Victoria were in the dining room when I arrived along with Marcus and 2 men I did not recognize. The tension in the room was palpable as they looked up at my entrance. There she is, Victoria said with forced sweetness. We were just discussing family business. Nothing that concerns you, of course. One of the strangers was introduced as Mr. Davis, their new attorney specializing in international law. The other was simply called Robert, with no explanation of his role. Both men studied me with the calculating eyes of people accustomed to solving problems through intimidation. Actually, my father said, since you are here, we should discuss your living arrangements. Given the current family tensions, we think it would be best if you found your own place. Immediately. The message was clear: they wanted me out of the house before their escape plan began. I understand completely, I replied, trying to sound defeated. I will start looking for apartments tomorrow. What they did not know was that I was wearing the wire that Detective Torres had provided, recording every word of their conversation. More importantly, Janet had already confirmed that the final asset transfers were scheduled for the next morning, which meant law enforcement would move tonight. I excused myself and went to my room, where I spent the next 2 hours documenting every detail I could remember about the strangers downstairs and texting updates to Sarah Martinez using a secure communication app. At 11 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Janet. Emergency meeting. Coffee shop. Come alone. Something in her tone made my blood run cold, but I had no choice except to trust my key ally. I snuck out through the back door and drove to our usual meeting spot, where Janet was waiting in the parking lot looking terrified. We have a problem, she said immediately. A big problem. What happened? She handed me a printed email that made my world collapse. It was correspondence between Detective Torres and someone named David Morrison, discussing payment schedules and information-sharing agreements. Janet Morrison is my maiden name, she explained, her voice shaking. David Morrison is my ex-husband, the same David Morrison who runs the shell company in the Cayman Islands for your father. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. I never told you that part because I was ashamed, she continued. When we divorced 5 years ago, David needed someone on the inside of legitimate companies to help with his money laundering operations. He threatened to destroy my career and take our children if I did not cooperate. Are you telling me that you have been working with my father all along? She nodded miserably. But not by choice. David forced me into this, and when you came to me with evidence, I saw a chance to finally break free from his control. I thought helping you would give me protection from both of them. Then why are you showing me this? I asked, holding up the email. Janet's next words destroyed everything I thought I knew about our investigation. Because Detective Torres is also working with David. They have been feeding information back to your father about every move law enforcement planned to make. The search warrants, the asset freezing orders, the arrest timeline. Your father knew about all of it within hours of our strategy meetings. My stomach dropped. That is impossible. Torres came recommended by the state attorney general. David has been paying him for 18 months to tip off wealthy clients about upcoming financial investigations. When Torres volunteered to help with your case, it was not to catch your father, it was to help him escape. I felt like I was drowning. Our entire plan had been compromised from the beginning. Every piece of evidence we thought was secret, every strategic move we thought was surprising. My father had known about it all. There is more, Janet said, pulling out her phone. David called me an hour ago. Your family is not planning to leave the country tomorrow. They are leaving tonight. Right now. What about the surveillance Torres said he had set up? There is no surveillance. Torres told your father exactly when and where to avoid law enforcement. By morning, they will be gone with all the stolen money, and we will be left holding evidence that proves nothing because the suspects have vanished. I tried calling Sarah Martinez, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Thomas Anderson's number did the same thing. Either they were unreachable or they had also been compromised. Janet, if Torres is corrupt and my family is escaping tonight, why are you telling me this? Why not just let me go down with the ship? Her answer revealed the final twist in this nightmare. Because David double-crossed me too. He told Torres that I was becoming unreliable, that I knew too much and was getting cold feet. Torres was supposed to arrest me tonight for embezzlement and falsifying financial records. I would become the scapegoat while your father and David disappeared with the money. How do you know this? Because Torres called me 20 minutes ago asking me to meet him at the police station to clarify some details about the evidence. When I said I was busy, he got angry and told me that refusing to cooperate would make me look guilty of the crimes I was supposedly helping to solve. We sat in her car, two women who had tried to do the right thing, and walked straight into a trap that had been waiting for us all along. My father had not just stolen money, he had corrupted law enforcement and turned my allies against me. What do we do now? I asked. Janet started her car. We go to the one person who definitely is not corrupt because your father never knew about him. Who? Thomas Anderson at the SEC. He has been working on this case independently using federal resources that local police cannot access. If we can reach him tonight with proof that Torres's dirty federal agents can still stop your family before they cross international borders. As we drove towards the federal building, I realized that my father's greatest strength, his ability to corrupt people through money and threats, had also created his greatest weakness. He had assumed that everyone could be bought or intimidated, including his own daughter. He was about to learn that some people cannot be broken no matter how much pressure is applied. And sometimes, when you think you have destroyed all your enemies, you have actually just motivated them to fight harder. The final battle was about to begin, and this time I knew exactly who I could trust. Racing through the empty streets at midnight with Janet, I felt like we were living in some impossible nightmare where everything I thought I knew about justice and law enforcement had been turned upside down. But as we pulled into the federal building parking lot, I saw something that gave me hope. Lights were still on in Thomas Anderson's office. "He is working late," Janet observed. "That is either very good news or very bad news for us." We found Thomas hunched over his computer, surrounded by printouts and financial documents. When he looked up and saw us, his expression immediately shifted from surprise to alarm. "What are you two doing here, and why do you both look terrified?" I quickly explained about Torres's corruption and my family's immediate escape plans. Thomas listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That explains a lot," he said grimly. "I have been wondering why our surveillance kept missing key financial transfers. Every time we thought we had located hidden assets, they would disappear before we could freeze them." He turned his computer screen toward us, showing a real-time tracking system I had never seen before. "What you do not know is that the federal investigation has been running parallel to the local one with higher security clearance and no information sharing with state or local authorities. We suspected there might be corruption in the local investigation, but we needed proof." Thomas pulled up a series of recorded phone calls. "We have been monitoring Detective Torres for the past week. These recordings show him receiving payments from offshore accounts and providing confidential investigation details to outside parties." The recordings were damning. Torres's voice was clearly audible as he provided my father with detailed information about search warrant timing, asset freezing procedures, and even my cooperation with prosecutors. "The good news," Thomas continued, "is that federal agents have been conducting their own surveillance of your family's activities. We know about the planned escape, and we have been tracking their financial movements independently." He showed us satellite images of our family estate taken just hours earlier. These photos show multiple vehicles loading luggage and documents. Heat signature analysis indicates at least 6 people in the house, which matches intelligence about hired security personnel. "Can you stop them?" I asked. "We already have," Thomas replied, pulling up another screen. "Federal marshals surrounded your property 30 minutes ago. Your father, Victoria, and Marcus are currently in custody. The hired security team was also arrested for conspiracy charges." I felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. It is over. Not quite. We still need to recover the stolen assets and build cases against all the co-conspirators. That is where you two come in. Thomas explained that while my family was in custody, David Morrison and the offshore financial network were still operating. Without Janet's inside knowledge and my evidence, it would be impossible to trace all the stolen funds. Janet, we need you to make one final contact with your ex-husband. Tell him the local investigation collapsed and that Torres helped your family escape. Make him think he is safe to begin moving the offshore money back into accessible accounts. And me, I asked. You are going to help us execute the largest financial fraud bust in Connecticut history. Over the next 6 hours, Janet made carefully scripted phone calls to David while federal agents monitored the conversations. She convinced him that the immediate danger had passed and that he should begin liquidating offshore assets to cover their tracks. What David did not know was that international banking authorities had been alerted and were tracking every transaction. As he moved money between accounts, federal systems were automatically freezing the assets and documenting the illegal transfers. Meanwhile, Thomas showed me the full scope of my father's criminal network. It was far larger than I had imagined. Blackwood Industries was just one of 12 companies in a money laundering operation that spans 6 states and 4 countries. Your father was not just stealing from his own employees, he was helping other corporate executives do the same thing. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing $53 million in illegal transfers. Employment records for over 400 families whose pensions and healthcare funds had been stolen. Email correspondence detailing plans to expand the operation to other manufacturing companies. Your father thought he was running a small-scale embezzlement scheme, Thomas explained. In reality, he was part of an international criminal organization that has been stealing from working families for over a decade. At dawn, everything changed again. A new federal agent arrived with information that made even Thomas look shocked. Agent Rodriguez was with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, a division I had never heard of that specialized in tracking international money laundering. We have been investigating David Morrison's organization for 3 years, she revealed. His ex-wife Janet has been our undercover asset the entire time. I stared at Janet in complete confusion. I am sorry for deceiving you, Janet said quietly. When David threatened me 5 years ago, I went to the FBI instead of cooperating with his demands. They helped me fake compliance while actually documenting every aspect of his criminal network. You have been working undercover this whole time, she nodded. The divorce was real and his threats were real. But instead of becoming his victim, I became the federal government's key witness against his entire operation. Agent Rodriguez explained that my discovery of the embezzlement had actually accelerated a federal investigation that was already in progress. Your evidence provided the final pieces we needed to simultaneously take down the entire network. While your father thought he was planning an escape, we were actually using his movements to map every aspect of the criminal organization. The scope of the bust was staggering. Coordinated arrests in 6 states, asset seizures totaling over $100 million, criminal charges against 47 individuals including corporate executives, bank officials, and government employees who had facilitated the money laundering. Detective Torres was just the beginning, Agent Rodriguez revealed. We have evidence of corruption involving 2 judges, a prosecutor, and multiple law enforcement officials across several jurisdictions. By noon, the stolen pension funds were being returned to employee accounts. The healthcare money was restored with interest. And my father's assets, everything from the family estate to his personal bank accounts, were being liquidated to provide restitution for the victims. What happens to me now? I asked. Thomas smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. You inherit a clean company that employs honest people and serves legitimate customers. Blackwood Industries will continue operating under federal oversight until new leadership is established. And my family? Your father is looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Victoria and Marcus face similar sentences as co-conspirators. They will never see freedom again. As we left the federal building that morning, I realized that my father's arrogance had led to his complete destruction. By underestimating me by corrupting local law enforcement, and by thinking he could outsmart the federal government, he had actually made it easier for justice to prevail. But the most satisfying irony was yet to come. 6 months later, I stood in the same study, where my father had thrown that inheritance contract across his desk and demanded I sign away my rights. The room looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. The federal trials had concluded with convictions for all defendants. My father received 28 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Victoria got 25 years for money laundering and conspiracy. Marcus, who had tried to claim ignorance of the financial crimes, still received 15 years for intimidation and witness tampering. Detective Torres was sentenced to 12 years for corruption and obstruction of justice. 2 judges lost their positions and faced federal charges, and David Morrison's international money laundering network was completely dismantled with assets seized in 14 countries. But the real justice came in the form of restoration for the victims. Mrs. Rodriguez's husband received his full pension plus interest and damages. The 23 families whose retirements had been stolen were made whole again. Healthcare accounts were restored with additional compensation for medical bills that could not be paid during the theft period. Blackwood Industries was not just surviving, it was thriving under new leadership that actually cared about employees. I had hired Janet as the new chief financial officer, and together we had implemented transparency measures that made future fraud impossible. The company was now employee-owned, with every worker receiving shares based on their years of service. Profit sharing replaced executive bonuses, and a worker council had voting rights on all major business decisions. More importantly, I had found my real family. Janet had become like an older sister, someone I could trust completely after everything we had been through together. Thomas Anderson and I had developed a friendship based on our shared commitment to fighting financial crime. Sarah Martinez had offered me a job as a prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. Mrs. Rodriguez still worked for us, but now as head of our new employee wellness program instead of as a housekeeper. "You did the right thing, mija," she told me regularly. "Your real mother would be so proud." The house itself had been transformed. We sold the main estate and used the proceeds for employee benefits and community programs. I moved into a smaller home near the factory where I could walk to work and be part of the community my family had tried to exploit. But the most satisfying moment came during my father's sentencing hearing. Richard Blackwood, the man who had called me too stupid to read fine print, sat in shackles as the federal judge read his crimes aloud. 28 counts of embezzlement, 12 counts of money laundering, conspiracy to defraud, witness intimidation, and racketeering. When given the opportunity to make a statement before sentencing, he looked directly at me for the first time since his arrest. "I taught you that family loyalty was everything," he said, his voice broken. "I never imagined you would choose strangers over your own blood." I stood up and faced him directly. "You taught me that family loyalty was everything," I replied. "But you never taught me what to do when family becomes the enemy of everything you raised me to believe in. You stole from people who trusted our name. You corrupted law enforcement officers who swore to protect our community, and you threatened to destroy your own daughter when she stood up for what was right." The courtroom was silent as I continued. "I did not choose strangers over family. I chose justice over corruption. I chose protecting innocent people over protecting guilty ones. And I chose building something honest over inheriting something built on lies." The judge's final words to my father were ones I will never forget. "Mr. Blackwood, your daughter showed more honor in 6 months than you showed in 20 years of criminal activity. She is everything you could have been if you had chosen integrity over greed." As my father was led away to begin his sentence, Victoria screamed at me from across the courtroom. "You destroyed us. You destroyed your own family." "No," I called back. "You destroyed yourselves. I just made sure everyone could see it." Today, exactly 1 year after my father threw that contract across his desk, I am preparing for my first day at the State Attorney General's office as a prosecutor specializing in corporate fraud. Janet will continue running Blackwood Industries as a model for ethical business practices, And together, we are working with federal authorities to educate other companies about preventing financial crimes. The inheritance contract that my father demanded I sign is now framed on my office wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can inherit from your family is the courage to stand up to them when they are wrong. I think about those employees who trusted the Blackwood name and almost lost everything because of my father's greed. I think about Mrs. Rodriguez's husband who can now retire with dignity because someone finally fought for what belonged to him. I think about all the families and other companies who might face similar betrayals and how my experience can help protect them. My real family is not the one I was born into. It is the one I chose through shared values and mutual respect. It is Janet who risked everything to do what was right. It is Thomas and Sarah who showed me that government can work when good people refuse to be corrupted. It is every employee at our company who comes to work knowing their labor will be respected and their futures protected. Sometimes justice takes time, but when it finally arrives, it is more satisfying than any revenge could ever be. And sometimes the best way to honor your family name is to save it from the people who are destroying it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what was right? Have you seen karma catch up with people who thought they were untouchable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because these stories of justice and redemption show us that truth really does win in the end. Smash that like button. If you believe corrupt people always get what they deserve, eventually hit subscribe for more real stories about standing up to family betrayal, and share this video with anyone who needs to know that fighting for justice is always worth it, even when the people you are fighting are the ones who raised you. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in accountability and second chances, and remember that sometimes the family you choose is more valuable than the family you were born into. Justice may be slow, but it never forgets, and neither should we.